Hello and welcome to Post Status Draft. My name is Brian Krogsgard. I'm here with my partner Cory Miller. Hey Cory.
Hey, it's good to be back on the Draft podcast.
I know, man. It's been a minute. That's okay though. We're here and we're here today, ready to talk about remote work and some of the stuff that's affecting um, our work psyche, even with an audience of folks that are familiar with working independently and self-driven. Feel like we've just thrown a lot of that up in the air with COVID stuff, and we're seeing event stuff going on, even with the virtual events. So we're going to talk about some of that. This episode of Post Status Draft is brought to you by Pagely. You can go to poststatus.com/Pagely to check out what they offer for everybody. A lot of our audience should know exactly who Pagely is because they've been in the managed hosting business longer than anybody, and they help big brands scale WordPress. They really took their expertise up market, which enables them to serve their customers in a really outstanding fashion, to offer you peace of mind for your website, and your company just does not have to worry about hosting whatsoever when you're running on Pagely. So go to poststatus.com/Pagely, and thanks to Pagely for being PostStatus partners. Cory, so we've got canceled virtual events now in addition to canceled physical events, and we don't know really what the timeline is like for bringing the physical events back. So I think that there's this, I wouldn't call it like a despair, but there's this lack of knowing in terms of what is next from a community sense, and which has been such an important part of the WordPress ecosystem. So you and I both feel like this is kind of the biggest thing going on right now in the space. There's other stuff too, of course, with WordPress 5.5 and people doing business and trying to keep up during uncertain economic times. But what about this side of things with the community element?
Yeah, we chose this topic because here's why it connects to WordPress community, specifically our community in Post Status is, most of us are not strangers to remote work and Zoom meetings and all that. Like we're the veterans of that. But, in my experience, Brian, I mean, you and I have connected over the years at these events like WordCamps. So we live in this most of us in WordPress live in this world where remote work is a fact of life for us. But I've seen me, my friends, you, partner, everybody, the outlet has always been like, hey, let's meet at WordCamp US, or
Yeah.
let's meet at Pressnomics, let's meet at WordCamp DFW, kind of my hometown,
Mm-hmm.
Dallas Fort Worth, my hometown WordCamp. And what I'm seeing is a lot of people saying, and this is a microcosm of happen on a bigger scale, of course, but it's isolation, like our social outlets. We can't do this with our families, even. So it's a big thing when there's already I see isolationism with remote work. I hear from so many people that it's we love it. That's what we want, but there is an isolation. So now you got COVID has exaggerated our outlets. I mean, or eliminated our outlets, which are these word camps.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of online talk like you have about it doesn't replace it. Like Zoom chat doesn't replace it or text chat. And I agree. There's nothing compared to being elbow to elbow to somebody and having drinks and dinner at a word camp or whatever it is to replace that. But I think, it's we've got to best make the best of what we have right now.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, I think we're not everybody in this ecosystem is remote, but most people at least know how to collaborate remotely, even if it's not their full time job, whether it's their side hustle or a community they're involved in or whatever. Um, but it's when you take away these opportunities to be together in person with people that you relate to professionally, and um, even companies that have advocated for, uh, well, Matt Mullenweg calls it distributed work. So like Automatic has team meetups all the time, and they,
Yep.
that he's considered that in his kind of working thesis and developing Automatic into such a large company as being a big part of it is to, hey, have these in-person meetups. Like I think quarterly for their teams and yearly for the whole company. That's a big part of the health of a remote organization. Of course, we're taking that away for all of these companies that work remotely in our ecosystem,
Right.
in addition to everything else, plus whatever like side stuff people did, their own events or things they wanted to go to or participate in. And when you compound that, it's made it, I think, to where we do have this sense of fatigue settling in. in general, and it's translating to the virtual events, which we were excited about for a while. And then I feel like now with this cancellation of WordCamp US and maybe like different people who've been putting them on, like not seeing the responses they want, I don't really know what's going on with that. But, it seems to be bleeding, this isolation seems to be bleeding into kind of all aspects of people's work lives.
Yeah. Think about like before I became a part owner and joined you at Post Status, I mean, you were like, hey, the isolation, like not having somebody just bounce stuff off of. That's a ton of freelancers in our community. Yeah. And then when we became partners, we said, we were just talking about this like 2 weeks ago. We said, you live in Birmingham, I live in Oklahoma City. We're gonna meet up quarterly in person. We can't do that now.
Right.
And so it just exaggerates a lot of things. But you're right. I mean, I hear people say that. I think it's been better. It's been not as bad for me because I've got two weekly stand-up meetings with you.
Yeah.
Where we don't talk about business the whole time. We're like, how are your kids? How are your kids? Hey, how the heck are you handling the facing the fact that education is not going to look like it, it normally does in the fall. Like so, we have kids very similar ages and stuff.
Why don't we dig into how people can structure their, the way they relate with people? Because I think you bring up a good point, and maybe this gets into some of the fatigue that people are feeling. Like, there's a difference between hopping on a webinar and watching educational content versus sharing in a group versus a one-on-one, like kind of heart-to-heart type of talk about family that's not really much to do with business, or maybe it's about business, but it's with someone that is going through the same struggle as you, whatever it is. There's a lot of different ways to meet online, and I think that it's easy to say like one is just representative of all of it. So let's discuss, what do you think are some successful ways that people can meet together online still and kind of avoid this burnout idea?
For me, Brian, it goes back to like, what do I feel like I'm missing? Is it just a conversation with an adult that understands, what I'm going through? Or, I'm smiling because you and I, with our kids, are just like, oh my gosh, it's nice to have a professional conversation. The physical thing is off the table right now for most things. I saw Kareem from Crowd Favorite a couple weeks ago. He was driving cross country to Atlanta and stopped by our house, and we did socially distanced thing. But the first thing I wanted to do when he got out of the car is give him a big old hug. Yeah. And we can't do that. That's off the table. Okay. For right now. But what do you feel like you need and are missing, and how can you do that in a form? So, going back to just a need-based thing for me is, what am I missing? I think I take for granted I've got you as a partner, I've got several other partners, and we have stand-ups every day. And it's like, I feel like we're doing life and I'm having adult conversations, and then occasionally I get to, Slack somebody and we meet and we haven't talked to. I'm trying to think the person I haven't talked to in a long time that I just did, like Brady Nord from Bluehost, who runs all of WordPress there. Man, it was just good a couple weeks ago. I haven't seen him in like probably 3 years. And I used to use WordCamp US and Pressnomics as a place to see everybody in 1 year.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, so what are you missing out on that, is, I think, a first step? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's good. And for me, it's really to have an itinerary for what you're doing when you're meeting virtually, even if the itinerary is to not talk about business. Like,
yeah.
I talk to Brian Richards every week. We have a standing video call, and we do have some stuff where it's like business related, and we say, hey, here's what I got going on, here's what I'd like to ask you about. But we definitely have dedicated time in that where it's just like, hey, what's going on with, that thing you're building or whatever you're doing over there, like, personal stuff outside of business. And it's a really important component of it to me. But to know each week, like, here's what I'm going to have in this call, and it's some accountability professionally. It's a opportunity to offer my own opinion or counsel to a friend that's asking for it, and then an opportunity to catch up. And I know that's going to exist. other times it could be just like, hey, this is a happy hour with coworkers and we're all just going to hang out. And you know what? It's going to be at the end of the business day. It's going to be in business hours. It's not like, that's another thing. These things can really be, uh, they can really wear on you if it's like, oh, I have my whole work day and then I'm expected to go to an hour long happy hour with coworkers when that's my only time of the day where I would otherwise just like go veg out. Uh, so that's another piece of advice, at least I would have, is if you're doing those type of things, keep them in the work, like in the work day for
Mhm.
your employees, so that they can really be an enjoyable time away from the work, rather than feeling like, social hour for work people in
Yeah, I want to
personas.
rant on something you said,
Yeah, go
which
for
is
it.
so true. We hear this thing as Zoom fatigue, and I actually just tweeted about it today because I was like, you know what? It's not. Is it really Zoom fatigue? That is not new. It's called meeting fatigue. I think most managers and leaders do not know how to run a freaking meeting. Like, our conversations are fairly structured, but we get to the point. But if you do that with more than one, a couple of people, the fact that it's a book called Read This Before Our Next Meeting. I posted it's on Amazon. You can look it up.
We'll put it in
A
show
mentor
notes
of
too.
mine, yeah, and a mentor of mine several years ago gave it to us, and we started reading and going, yes, there should be purpose to meetings. There should be an agenda. I think a lot of that is a little bit outside the bubble, is my perception out of the WordPress stuff, because we've been doing online stuff and not just have meetings for meetings kind of thing. But it's the abuse of, oh, I can't see them next door, so let's, or in my cubicle or out in the office, so let's make sure we can see everybody on TV, on Zoom. I almost said TV, and, and that's ridiculous. But I think you're right too. I get it. Like today, I've got back to backs all day. Am I going to be tired? Yes, but they all have purpose and intention. So I just want to rant on that because you said it great in talking about like how to run a meeting, but they should be purposeful. Our good friend Sherry Walling, psychologist that works with a lot of founders, said, a couple months ago, um, that schedule happy hours that are just happy hours, for friends, with friends and colleagues, like you said, with Brian Richards. You got that. I've got that with you all partners and other friends. Lisa Sam Wilson, we have a monthly talk. Now that was before COVID,
Yeah,
and we've had to bump it and stuff like that. But we at least, like, maybe it's not every week, but once a month,
some kind of
I
check
should,
in. Yeah.
yeah, a check in. And let me add one quick note. When you're talking about like a Brian Richards conversation or friends conversation, I think one key thing is to share your experiences. So you come and you say, "Hey, I'm frustrated. Let's say, for example, I can't balance everything. My wife's working, I'm working. We can't." And instead of giving you my advice, I share, Brian, I'm in the same boat. And then I share the truth of what we're trying to do, instead of saying you should do this, you should do that. I think that makes a better conversation with friends, is instead of trying to prescribe, you just share common experiences. It shows empathy and then actual experience, not you should do this. When most of us that give advice, we're like, do you really take your advice too?
That's
So
interesting. I've actually heard of similar techniques when people talk about how to um, be there for someone in grief. So rather than saying like, I know what you're going through, or you should do this, just say like, I'm here with you. You know, in
yeah.
terms of handling grief. So it's interesting that an approach to handling grief and an approach to communing with friends are similar in some ways. I have a concept I'd like to ask you about that I've been noodling on. And I know some teams, remote teams, have experimented with this before, pre-COVID. But what do you think about collaborative work over video chat? So like, when you're in the office, you can take off your headphones and just ask somebody a question, or you can walk down the hallway and have a chat about an idea you're noodling on. That you can kind of do via Slack, but it's typing, it's not quite the same. What do you think about having, say, in like a half day or something that you put aside for someone that you're working maybe parallel to in some way, like you're a similar goal, and you just kind of work together? You're on a video call and you have eyes and ears. So if you say something, like they're going to hear it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that as an experiment?
I've actually been thinking about that for our partnership. Like, so it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. Glenn Ansley, Lee, and Ayotte were working on iThemes Exchange. And this was before some of the tools, and forgive me for the timeline, but the tools were there. And what they were doing, because they were collaborating, is they got on Slack and they muted, or not Slack, Skype, and they muted and they would unmute. Now, this is actually collaborating on a project, and they'd unmute when they need to talk. And I was like, that's kind of cool. There's this feeling that somebody's there with you, and it's kind of like the walkie-talkie,
Yeah.
unmute. So I love it. I think it would be cool.
I think there's a couple interesting things that could do as well. For like, one of the things when I know I'm burnt out, I have this desire to be away from my desk. I still have a desire to do the work or to be with people, but it's like sometimes I'm just like, I gotta go get a cup of coffee. I gotta go on a walk. I gotta get out of here. And I feel like if you're there with someone, that's less likely to like just burn at you while during your workday. This desire to like get up and go somewhere else. So I feel like if someone's there, it's like it's not. I wouldn't even call it accountability so much as that it's just a togetherness that exists, and you understand you're both there. You're not like there to get on to one another if like you feel like they're slacking off or something. But there's this kind of component of an office environment where you're like, okay, I'm at work and I need to stay focused, and this is my job. And by the way, here's someone I can, have some words with or chat with if I need to, and they're gonna support me in my work day. So it's an experiment that I'm interested in trying.
Jesse Gardner, he's a longtime friend of mine. He's worked at AMC and done really good, cool projects, like particularly on like the Walking Dead and things like that. I've seen him tweet. He does co-working sessions like that. I haven't ever jumped on, but I've kind of been curious enough. This is interesting. Knowing yourself, like I don't want to be disturbed at work.
Yeah.
If I'm working on something, unless I have a meeting, I don't want to be disturbed. So I'm weird and different like that. But I think there are people that really feed off the engagement, and something like that could work. And I think knowing yourself, I would prefer a Slack chat to an online video, just because I can juggle.
Yeah, it's certainly not the type of thing where I feel like it's certain. I mean, if you have other meetings, you have stuff going on, or if you have like you got to be in the zone. Like you're writing a blog post or an important email or a pitch doc or whatever. But there are some types of work where maybe you need headphones on to work on it or something like that. But like you can have someone kind of come in and force a ping to you, and it's no problem to put it down for a second and hear them, but to just know that you're there together. I don't know. It's just something it may be a massive fail. I'm interested in listeners if they have done it before, if what they think about it, what they thought about it. And it certainly wouldn't be 100% of the time, but I'm curious, like what if I did this, I don't know, half a day a week?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I haven't felt that big of a need to do something like a co-working, and really because I've got, partner conversations all week with all you great people that I used to hang out with at word camps. I do miss you guys, hugging you and sitting next to each other and having dinner and all that kind of stuff. I did want to mention though, this is where Big Orange Heart, which used to be known as WP and Up, comes into play too. Like if that feeling, there's resources there in particular, and also venues like they're paid venues, but Talkspace too. And I can't underscore enough the importance of having a counselor. I meet with my mental health therapist every other week now. There was a stretch where I was going every week, but now every other week, and just getting some perspective. So I think that's a big component in this too. But I wanted to mention Big Orange Heart. So many good resources, so many good people there, specifically for people working remote, and kind of like the fact of life we're all in as a world right now is like we're isolated.
Yeah. So in a WordPress perspective, there's also, at WordCamps, they've always had these contributor days and these opportunities for people to come in and collaborate in person. What do you think is possible in that sense to like get a bunch of people to collaborate together on making WordPress or having team meetings? Do you think, that seems like one of the big losses that we're having with WordCamps being canceled for me.
We used to think, okay, when you pull a team member in, I'm going to get to the word of your question, but when we pull the team in, we want them to feel like they belong. And what's one of the best way to feel like you belong is that you're actively contributing to the community you're a part of, the group. And I think those type of things would be fantastic. Like, not only you're getting the social engagement, but you're contributing, you know, that's a feeling of satisfaction, of meaning and purpose, that I think would be helpful. Now, does it replace the, elbow to elbow thing? No, but it gets us close to it. And I think we have to be creative in how we do that. Like, we have to accept the fact this is our life right now,
Yeah.
and find ways. But I think there's a brilliant idea, is to do the same things, find a venue to translate those things, for all of us to be able to contribute.
And I've got another question for you as a manager. You've managed people for a long time, so how would you recommend other managers to be on the lookout to detect when a person working with them or for them is maybe they're burnt out, or maybe you just see that their work isn't there, and like how do you try to see that and then also guide them and protect your team that way?
Knowing your team is the first step, knowing how people are wired, and we're all wired differently. Like, if we were on a team and I knew you, Brian, I'd be like, I want you to spend the next hour reading on something completely unrelated to the work we do, like WordPress. I'd be like, just kind of knowing you a little bit, I'd be like, I want you to take a 2-hour sabbatical.
Yeah.
And I want you to read, like, if I'm sensing your burnout, 2-hour sabbatical for you, just because I know you like to learn, you like to grasp new stuff. And, at the end, Brian, maybe you give me 2 takeaways. That's it. But, like, really the focus should be, take a 2-hour sabbatical on the clock. We did that some at iThemes, and it was different for everyone. You can't go to a museum, but we said to our designers, like, go to a museum that anything, just take half a day. But I think knowing that person, like, for instance, if they suffer from some mental health, issues, depression, particularly, like right now or something, is okay. I want you to take the next hour and just walk around your house, like, get into the sun. And, you have to balance the HR stuff and all of this, but if
Yeah.
you're doing it for the benefit of the other, like right now, I want to pay for the next hour of your time to just get out. Do you have a bicycle? Go out and ride your bike. Like, those things we all know, but sometimes need a nudge from our manager or leader to do so. Or Friday, you're off grid. I want you to unplug your router, or like your internet, and like do nothing.
I don't even know what I'd do with myself. So
You'd be forced to go analog, right?
I guess so. Yeah, I'd probably read a book. And you brought up something there about get up, go ride a bike. A lot of remote workers that I know, people who've worked in our ecosystem for a long time, they really are rejuvenated by just changing physical locations. So maybe they work from their home office normally, but you know a couple times a week they go spend 3 or 4 hours in a coffee shop or something, and that's something we've really lost, is that ability to just pick up and go somewhere else for a while and find some peace elsewhere. And I think what can make that doubly difficult is if your family is home during all of this time, which there probably is. That's even more likely right now, because between COVID and summer, like it's really easy for your whole family to be home, and like you can't go escape to a coffee shop to work in a different type of silence for a couple of hours or whatever. Do you have any advice for how someone could escape in that way? Like they still want to work, but they're looking for focus more than they're looking for just escape.
We've got a nice little patio, and so sometimes we'll go out there. Although in Oklahoma, it's just forbiddable, like hot and humid. But I think you and your family did it recently too. If you're able to get into like an Airbnb situation, but we just got back from New Mexico. My parents were very thankful to have access to their cabin, and so we spent a week out there, and it was just nice, that change of pace. But the other experience share is not mine, but one of our family members. They have an RV, and they parked their RV in their front yard and just worked from it, worked out of it, and all that stuff.
That's good.
Uh, I think there's still options, and that's where we need to get creative. Coffee shops here in Oklahoma City are open right now,
Yeah.
socially distanced and everything. But I'm like, oh my gosh! But could you go? I don't think I'd recommend anybody go necessarily to a closed space with a lot of people.
Yeah. No,
But
that's what I'm trying to.
parks,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think parks and like just tether to your phone if you need to, or something like that. I know, like, it depends on your space. Like some people don't even have a porch in peace. I know, like for me,
No.
if my kids are here, I'm struggling because this office that I'm in is also the playroom, and it's also at the
Oh,
very front of the house. So I'm, 15 feet from where they would want to watch TV or like be in the front yard. So I'd have to go like to the back of our house where we have a carport or something, and
yeah.
I'd have to go some weird places on our property in order to get away without going away.
I'd love to hear our community and our subscribers tips and everything. And I would also say, I think those of us in remote work, distributed work, are more the experts that most of our world and community are grappling with. You can share some tips about what works for you, and I would encourage you to do that in our post status Slack and tweet and all that Facebook, because we probably take for granted how many people in our life don't this isn't the norm to work from home. I like your ideas too. Like, I even thought like, what if I go home and I put on Apple TV and I just put a picture in my living room, and I just, some of the screensavers from Apple TV, I'm just like, I get so distracted. I'm like, oh my God, I want to watch that as they hover over Earth, you know? But like, what if you, I don't know, virtual fireplace or something, those might be some thoughts too. I haven't tried those. My kids would be like hanging on my head as I tried to do that.
Yeah,
But
figure out some kind of way to get some serenity in your normal environment and um, get your normal environment situated a little differently. One for me, I mentioned, this is also my kids' playroom. Uh, I swear sometimes my mood is different if this room is messy versus
yeah.
if it's been picked up. So for me, it's like I really want this room to be picked up from all the toys playing in the afternoon that night so that the next morning when I go in, it's not like I'm stumbling over wooden train tracks and dinosaurs and stuff. Uh, and that's a small thing, but it does enhance my work day.
Yeah, I totally agree, and I'm like harking. I'm hearing Sherry Walling in my head, and on all these kinds of things is how do you get creative with everything you're doing, and try to get a little bit. I love those tips.
Yeah. Well, I think we should just leave it there. But we wanted
Yep.
to come on and encourage folks uh, you know, to don't get encourage them to say don't get discouraged. There are people out there. Reach out to your friends if you feel fatigued by all the work from home and the lack of in-person events or professional relationships. And hey, you know what? This is not a plug we intended, but the Post Status Slack is a great place to have an
Yep.
asynchronous chat related to WordPress stuff, and you can hop in there and chat with folks anytime. If you go to poststatus.com/club and sign up, and then other than that, we just I guess want to say thanks again to Pagely for bringing this episode to us. Go to poststatus.com/Pagely to check out everything that they've got going on, and we'll see everybody next time.